Iceland, on the confines of the Arctic Circle, is a fascinating island where an original hardy breed of men and women live out their purest aspirations. A touching authenticity beats in the hearts of its inhabitants. They know that nature here is uncompromising, so they have no other choice but to remain humble and to live thanks to what it can offer. Like this island, where the forces of the earth are visible everywhere, the Icelanders feel free and independent.
A bad day outside is always better than a good day in the office.
To be in nature is maybe the most important for me, just to be somewhere. It doesn't have to be spectacular, but just to feel the power of nature, the force, and to be small in nature is something I really enjoy. And that's why I like to put up my tent a little bit off from the road, on a place that looks a little bit more wild and remote, and then feel one with nature. That's something I really enjoy.
Terje has always been fascinated by earth sciences. First, he studied astronomy in the Netherlands, his home country. Then he went into glaciology, a discipline that allowed him to wed his two great passions, science and the mountains. Studying glaciers puts him on the cutting edge of climate warming research. This land, with the primitive, rugged force of its volcanic landscapes, symbolizes nature in its purest state.
The untouched wild nature is really putting into a corner, and it's getting less and less. So it's harder for us to come into contact with the wild nature. There's some of it left in Iceland, which is very special. And I think it's very interesting and inspiring for me to try to keep these places that we still have on the planet and to really try to preserve it, because they become so precious and there are so few of them left.
Terje moved to Iceland 4 years ago. This country is sitting on the world's most active hotspot, where one can observe the formation of our planet in real time. Iceland is a cauldron and a fascinating land of experimentation for scientists who, like Terje, are actively committed to the preservation of the Earth. Well, if you don't have a driver's license and you're low on funds, hitchhiking is the best way to get around, even in this country with its often harsh weather. Today, Terje is headed for a vast glacier field in the south to lead a scientific expedition. He'll be meeting up with his friend Joaquin at a refuge at the foot of the glacier Vatna.
Okay, cool. Where are you heading?
I'm going to Skaftafell.
Oh, cool.
Going to work.
Yeah. That's the same direction I'm going.
That's great.
Yeah, cool. What are you working with?
I'm working on the glacier, guiding people, taking trips.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Have you been on Fatlikut as well? Or?
Yeah, I've been on Fatlikut, and I've been on Skaftafellsjökull, I've been on Svínafellsjökull, I've been on Fjallsjökull, I've been on Heinabergsjökull, I've been on Breiðamerkurjökull, I've been on Skeiðarjökull, I've been on most
all the glaciers from the south coast.
Yeah, I've taken most of the south coast and gone on all the glaciers, because even if I have days off, I will still go on the glacier.
Yeah, it is right.
It's really enjoyable for me because I'm always driving this route like a few times a month. So it's really enjoyable for me to meet up with people from all over the world that I can chat with them on the way. Time flies much faster when you have somebody in the car with you.
On a geological timescale, Iceland is no more than a newborn. Hardly 20 million years have elapsed since this island began to emerge from the volcanoes on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. Iceland is home to around 100 volcanoes that are a permanent threat to the population. Over the last few centuries, Iceland has experienced a major eruption every 5 years on an average. Vast expanses of the landscape are old lava fields covered in surface moss, while hidden beneath lie surprising geological formations.
So once this was a fresh eruption, it was a big lava field. And what happens at some point is that the surface cools down and that becomes solid, but then the lava can still flow under it. So here the surface cooled down first, but then inside here was kind of a river of lava that flowed through this tube. That's why it's called the lava tube.
Ever since the first Vikings landed on the shores of Iceland more than 1,000 years ago, the settlers here have managed to survive on their island by waging a constant struggle with the hostile, violent land. A very revealing episode of that struggle took place in the Westman Islands off the southern coast of Iceland. January 23rd, 1973. In the middle of the night, fountains of lava burst forth from the Helgafell volcano overlooking the fishing village and flowed down to the sea in a torrent of molten rock. 5,000 inhabitants were rapidly evacuated to the mainland. The eruption would last several months, burying the town under tons of ash. Down through the generations, Icelanders have learned that they mustn't look on nature as an enemy, that they could contain its wrath by remaining humble before it and using their wits. the population of Westman refused to give in to the fury of the earth and mobilized in an amazing show of solidarity. Rescue workers decided to pump millions of tons of seawater onto the lava flows to stop their advance. In this Homeric battle of water against fire, the port and a part of the town were saved.
Joaquin, yo, what up, dude? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Nice.
You managed.
Yeah, I got here. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so we're having pasta with tuna and tomato sauce.
Wow, nice.
Pretty sweet.
Typical mountaineering food.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fast.
I'm gonna start also checking the...
Joaquin, a Spaniard, also felt the magnetic pull of this majestic island. Like Terje, he spends all his time in an effort to understand the mechanisms of our planet in order to better defend it. The two friends are going to ascend the glacier tomorrow to set up a GPS device that will measure the glacier's speed.
Yeah.
So we're just going to these crevasses right there, because it's still moving quite fast, but not too fast.
Yeah, it must be amazing, the landscape of there. I have never been in that area, so I'm really looking forward.
Yeah, okay. I never really... They're pretty cool, but I never really saw it before.
The platform that Terje has picked out in the midst of the crevices is a 3-hour hike from the refuge. Glaciers cover 10% of the Earth's surface, but all over the world their area is shrinking year by year. These giants of ice are one of the more visible signs of the climate change our planet has been subject to. You can see with your own eyes that they are dying. Terje and Joaquin have chosen to devote their lives to exploring glaciers in order to bear witness to their rapid decline. Their work leads to predictions about another phenomenon that concerns us all, the rising sea levels and its direct consequence, the disappearance of inhabited land.
I'm working a bit more with satellite images, and he's working with GPS. With a satellite image, you can get the full glacier, and with this, you can get a really, really accurate one single point. So the best is, of course, to combine both. Yeah.
I think it's rolling.
Yeah. So here is the number of satellites.
At this place, I really feel like home. It's a really special place. I have often the feeling the glaciers are calling me. They're kind of making, talking to me, saying, "Come, come."
The glacier that Terje and Joaquin are studying is part of Europe's largest glacier zone. In October 1996, in this same spot, the volcano under the glacier awoke. The ice cap was blown into the sky in a gigantic eruption of ash and steam. The millions of cubic meters of melted ice ran off and formed a lake. When the ice damming the lake gave way, the mass of water released swept away everything in its path. For geologists, it stands out as one of the most remarkable eruptions of the century, for these are the natural phenomena that formed Iceland's present landscapes. Before such a spectacle, men like Terje naturally take a philosophical perspective of the mechanisms governing the colossal forces of our planet.
When I was studying physics, I was thinking about what life is. And in physics, you think a lot about time, and time makes change possible. And in a way, time is change. And I started to think about that maybe the change itself is life. Everything that changes is life. So it's a much broader and wider concept of what life is. And that way of looking at the world, a glacier is also a living thing. Right here we're making a little cairn so we can find the right way down. But it's very small. We want to keep it small because we're in a national park of Iceland and we're not supposed to make cairns because then people will always follow the same trail and they don't want to have a lot of trails going through the national park. So on the way down, hopefully you can find it and then destroy it on the way down. Wow, crazy man.
Cool. Nice. Wow.
Spectacular.
Wow. You will miss completely all of those things, all of those details. If you are just sitting on the office, even if you are working with the glaciers, you're missing like half of the experience. The best way to know how they are is just to look at them. So, yeah. Okay, that's the whole point. I don't know. Some geological stuff must happen there.
It's a country where people have suffered from nature for a long time, and it's harsh. It's really rough, and that's all part of it. And you can't kind of sit in a car or stay on the main road and escape everything and try to pretend like it's not there. But I like to be outside and to have it in my face, to feel the wind, to feel cold, and actually to feel miserable, to feel bad, and to kind of suffer. I think it's a part of it. I think you cannot really be in Iceland without suffering.
Terje is not about to leave this country. He is pursuing his research with dogged determination, hoping to unlock the secrets of the glaciers. The commitment of these men may one day allow us to better predict the changes of our planet. Weather permitting, the captain of the Draumur scans the waters of the fjord of Dalvik. These arms of the sea that cut deep into the land provide food and shelter for an abundance of whales. Leah was born here in Iceland 29 years ago. Her mother is French and her father, skipper of a fishing boat, Icelandic. She's a journalist and is presently doing an article on her native region, which is far off the beaten path.
Wow, great. That's a beautiful humpbacked whale putting on a show, for the pleasure of all concerned. The fjord is just swarming with whales, and we can see them now especially because winter is coming on, and this is when they migrate to the South Pacific. So this is the ideal season for whale watching. Before they head off in search of a warmer climate.
There were 10 of them here yesterday, so there could be 10 today as well.
The sea is calm today.
Yes, a beautiful day. Perfect for us, but sometimes it's harder to spot the whales when the sea is flat, because they just stay below the surface and don't do anything. They don't even come up to blow.
Leah is Franco-Icelandic. She studied philosophy in Paris. The subject of her dissertation was tolerance among different peoples, something she, with her mixed background, knows about firsthand. Drawing on her double culture, she writes for the Pourquoi Pas, a newsletter named after the ship of Commander Charcot, the French explorer who perished when his ship ran aground on the coast of Iceland.
This will appear in the little French newsletter I started with a few friends. It's meant for Iceland's French-speaking community and all lovers of Iceland. It will come out next summer, the July 2016 issue. We do one per year.
Leah spent the first 6 years of her life in Iceland. When her brother Victor was born, her mother decided to return to France with the 2 children. But Leah and Victor would spend their summer vacations in Dalvik with their Icelandic father.
Straddling the 2 cultures is tricky. Whichever country you're in, you're always kind of a foreigner. On the other hand, the great thing is, as Youth said, you never know your own language as well as when you speak another. And being a dual national maybe makes me someone who has an intimate knowledge of both countries, and that's a great asset. So I really consider that I belong in both countries. I could never choose.
When Victor came of age, he decided to settle permanently in Iceland and work on his father's fishing trawler. He also trained to become a river fishing guide.
I can't remember when I started fishing. I know I started very young. Whether it was fresh water, or the rivers, or the sea, I think it was my grandfather who took me fishing for the first time, and then it was my father. We would go every summer. So of course I love it. But it's not just the fishing, it's being out in nature, enjoying the environment. So it's the whole thing.
It's a very Icelandic thing, being a fisherman by profession and fishing as a hobby. Everything revolves around fishing. You work at sea and spend your vacations on the rivers.
Wow. Is that nice or what? It should flake off easily. It's cooked to perfection, nice and tender.
Yeah, I can tell.
Delicious.
The Icelandic word for stupid is heimskur, a person who has never left home. So the ideal is to go abroad and come back home. Then he won't be a heimskur. He didn't just stay at home. On the other hand, he can't not come back. That's how it is, right?
That's right. You always come back eventually.
It's like a magnet. There's nothing to match it. It's like absolute freedom.
Three times a week, the ferry heads out to Grimsey. Lost in the mists, this small island, worn and scarred by the wind and storms of the Atlantic, is a 3-hour boat ride to the north of Dalvik. Grimsey is a land out of time. Leah says that this island lying on the Arctic Circle embodies the very soul of Iceland. The tightly knit community of men and women is an ideal source of inspiration for the stories she writes for her paper. On Grimsey, there are no more than 90 inhabitants clinging to this little parcel of land. A port, a school, and just one store. Here, life revolves around the comings and goings of the fishing boats.
My grandfather was born on Grimsey. So yes, we're necessarily cousins with everyone on the island. But here, it generally turns out that you're cousins with everybody. There's even an app for when you're at a party. You can check to make sure you're not coming onto your own cousin. But here the risks are even higher, given the size of the island and the few families living here. The waves were a good 2.5 meters yesterday.
They're a little lower today, but they take time to settle down after a storm like that. The sea is still pretty rough.
The biggest cod there is 25 kilos, right?
That sounds about right. And now we're coming into the very best fishing season.
Really? Why?
Because there's less for the fish to eat in the ocean, so they'll take our bait more readily.
It's like the story of my family here. All the men are fishermen, so I've often been here when they'd bring their catch into port. I'd often be here to greet them. Same thing when they'd go out. I'd watch them leave. I used to see the men coming back, and then I'd ask them how it went, what kind of catch they got.
All year round, storms buffet Grimsey's black cliffs. These palisades form the ramparts of a wild land. The fishermen are well aware of their sea's reputation. Generous with its fish, but violent and unpredictable. Everyone here knows that you can't bargain with its whims. The storms beat down on the fishermen at sea, and the ocean is a beast that swallows them alive. Not a single family on Grimsey has been spared.
In the old days, many Icelanders lived in this type of place because there was food. And we should never forget that 100 years ago there was nothing here in Iceland. It was only after the Second World War that the whole infrastructure was created. But as my father always says, when they had Versailles in France, Iceland had only a few wooden houses. We have to keep in mind that this is still a new world. It's as if we farmers and fishermen here in Iceland all of a sudden woke up in a suit and tie. And Grimsey is still a testimony to how life used to be. The fact that there are still people living here is just amazing.
When you live on Grimsey, you necessarily have stories to tell. Like Bjarni, the village elder. He's sharing his love of the island with Leah.
Ja. Ja.
This is it?
It was originally a gas lighthouse. We turned it off at the beginning of the war.
So there was only the pastor left?
Only the pastor and 2 old-timers. We wrote to the bishop to find new men to settle in Grimsey.
Thank you.
It was nice.
It's pretty much the story of my life. Always meeting up with these people in France and Iceland, always trying to understand the cultures of the 2 countries. What makes these 2 populations so different when they're only 3 hours apart by plane? Yes, it's something I'm really interested in, and I've been trying to understand it since childhood. But I'm not sure I'll ever find an answer, not a clear-cut answer in any case. But through my articles and encounters, I can try to catch a glimpse of the answer.
I think, yeah, in some parts of the world, when people live in a city and they go to nature, like going to a museum or a park or something, they go and watch it, and then they go home again. That's not the life that I want to live. Just want to live in it. I want to be part of it, and I want to play with it. And it's a kind of also a freedom. I mean, you don't have any motor, you can go wherever you want. I mean, I could start tomorrow or today, we can just go on for many months, you know? Don't have to ask anybody. Freedom.
Siggy was born in the West Fjords. He worked as a naval architect in Iceland, in Canada, and in places the world over. 10 years ago, he gave it all up and bought a sailboat, the Aurora, to marry his 2 passions, the mountains and the sea. Thanks to his boat, Siggy can share his favorite spots of the West Fjords with other sports and nature lovers. Greenland, some 300 kilometers to the north, is a regular destination of his outings. But his favorite playground is still his own wild region. Here at the ends of the earth, nature is unforgiving, but it is wild and unspoiled like no other place in the world.
Þessi kafa kannski allir 3 eða 4 í einu.
Today, the 2 men on board the Aurora with him are his son, Haukur, and his cousin Vidar. The family will be spending a few days together so that Vidar can perfect his sailing techniques.
No, it's a humpback whale. I think they live quite comfortably here in this place, and probably the best thing we can do is just observe them and, you know, let them in peace. That's why you see a whale and, you know, what's it doing? I don't know. It's just being a whale, you know. Same as a whale. Look at me. What's it doing? Like just being a human, probably.
That's not allowed. Don't do that. Too late. We'll have to turn.
In a week, Vidar will be leaving for England to get his yachtmaster certification. Then he will also become a captain. The promise of a new life.
We turn there, and we'll be headed toward the trawler. And then we'll come back.
Tell me exactly when.
You just have to be careful not to slacken the jib.
Right.
9 months ago, while out skiing, Vidar was caught in an avalanche. It cracked several neck vertebrae and broke his arm.
Ready? Now you can let go. Take hold and pull. Very good.
Vidar barely survived, but he was laid up in the hospital for several weeks. His iron determination, along with painful sessions of physiotherapy, allowed him to gradually recover his mobility. And Siggy played a crucial role by training him in sailing.
He's giving me this opportunity to learn from him, you know, because he's been sailing for 20 years, you know. And it's also very important after an accident, when you're recovering, you have some sort of goal. And give me a purpose to get back, to get fit again and strong again, to go, to learn to sail, you know.
Oh yeah, he's getting well trained, you know. Better and better. Okay.
He's an inspiring person for sailing.
I knew Vidar from the time he was a baby almost, you know. He's a similar age to my son, Haukur. And I think he's been, I mean, he's still young. He's kind of feeling his way around life, and he's very interested in all these outdoor. We managed to convert him from skiing to sailing. So yeah, he's a good kid, and I think he can do some nice things.
The 3 men have dropped anchor off Hesteri, in the heart of the West Fjords. Siggy is well acquainted with the history of this abandoned village, which is a testimony to this region's past.
This is an Arctic fox. The Arctic fox is the only native mammal of Iceland. So when the Vikings arrived in Iceland 1,000 years ago, there was only one mammal in the whole country, and that was the Arctic fox. Yeah, generally in Iceland, in most places in Iceland, they are shot. But here in this region, they are protected because it's a nature reserve, and it's not allowed to shoot the foxes.
After the Second World War, Icelandic society underwent a total metamorphosis. The farmers and fishermen isolated in remote communities began to flee their living conditions, which were extremely harsh, particularly in winter. The decline of these villages, cut off from the rest of the world for 8 months of the year, became inexorable.
When they lost a doctor, that was the kind of the final nail in the coffin. Eventually, in the early 1950s, there's basically a few, 4 or 5 families left, and they just sat down and had a meeting and said, this is it, let's go all together. You know, we don't want to just slowly fade away. So they all packed up and went all together. 1952, I think the last people moved away. Since then, nobody's lived here.
Yet in its day, Hesteri had up to 100 residents. There was even postal service, a store, and a school. Thanks to whaling, this community was the center of the entire region. Now, all that remains are a few houses and the ruins of the old whaling station.
They used this to melt down the blubber for the oil. They were mainly after the oil.
And the meat, it went to the locals?
Or they'd throw it away. Later, they began to make animal meal with the meat.
At the end of the 19th century, the sea around Iceland was rich with whales. Around 1890, Norwegians moved into Hesteri to systematically whale the nearby fjords. For the inhabitants of the West Fjords, who had lived closed in on themselves, it was a radical change. All of a sudden, they came into contact with the rest of the world. Foreigners came to work in their region and intermarried with the local women. Icelanders left their country to learn a profession, then came back with new skills. After 20 years, Iceland banned whaling, for nearly all the whales had been massacred. "15 years later, the country once again authorized whaling, but issued permits only to Icelandic companies.
It's very much a part of Icelandic history, yeah. People say, well, we should just bomb it all down and clean it, you know, because it's a pollution in the environment, but I think it's old enough that it's an interesting kind of a relic in a way, you know. I like to come here. It's getting maybe a bit dangerous, falling on your head, but yeah, I like it.
People survived here in these fjords for hundreds of years, or 1,000 years almost, with what they can find in these fjords. Fish in the fjords, and mussels, and birds, and eggs, and anything they could find. They were 100% sustainable for hundreds of years, so it's totally possible.
Delicacy. Still alive. It's like oysters, just better. More taste.
There are very few roads in the West Fjords, so the only way to get to the wildest spots is by boat. This isolated territory has given rise to generations of intrepid sailors, like Siggy, eager for adventure. Siggy has turned the Aurora into an ideal base camp. On board, life unfolds to the rhythm of the sun. And when night falls, the Aurora becomes a cozy cocoon, like every other home in Iceland.
She's become a bit of a mountain hut that we can move around. You can put your anchor down and live on the boat, go ashore for ski, hike, diving, whatever. I mean, all kinds of activities. Come back on the boat, have some nice dinner, good company, good conversation around the table, solve every problem of the world, go to bed, sleep, and wake up ready for the next day. That's kind of what Aurora does for me.
Exchange is the cornerstone of Siggy's philosophy of life. What he has taught Vidar goes far beyond mere sailing techniques. He has transmitted to him the joy of being one with nature, and Vidar has drawn fresh strength from this to move on with his life.
What I discovered in myself that I want to learn is more about the ocean, about the sea, because I live so close to it, you know, we're dependent on it, and it's big, and it's dangerous, and it's beautiful, and it's mysterious, and everything, you know, it has a deep meaning for me. Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying something new, learning something new. I don't know where I'm gonna go, what I'm gonna do, just explore the ocean.
Yeah, he's ready. So in, 5-6 days, we'll be sailing in South England. Make us proud. I always like to learn, so it's my own self-interest. I'm just hoping that I'm going to learn something more when Vidar comes back. That'll be good.
Vidar, following the time-honored Icelandic tradition, will go abroad and then come back, richer for the experience. Every year, the first snowfalls are a signal for the northern Icelanders. They are ready to face the winter, to hunker down until spring. The waters of the fjord will soon form a dense ice pack, and Siggy will have to moor his boat as the days gradually shrink to nothing, and one long night covers this land of ice. Somewhere on Earth invites you to the far north, to the Kingdom of Norway, an immense territory that extends well beyond the Arctic Circle. Norway has 80,000 kilometers of coast. It's the most irregular coastline in the world and the longest in Europe. Terje Isungset is not your ordinary artist. This composer draws his inspiration from the elements of nature. He's blazing new trails in music and doing the impossible. He makes ice music. Aleksander Lyngberg is an extreme adventurer, and Lapland is an ideal terrain for him to live out his passions. He makes his living from the sea, and the wind carries his dreams. Now he's getting ready to tackle the world's toughest snowkite competition. Heidi Sevestre is a glaciologist. This young French woman lives year-round in the Svalbard Islands, just a few hundred kilometers from the North Pole. Here in these northern lands, she has found an untamed expanse that can satisfy her thirst for freedom.
As soon as you set foot here, you feel right at home. And it's really a little bubble of peace and quiet. The longer you stay here in Svalbard, the harder it is to leave.
The Arctic acts like a magnet for those in quest of the absolute. The Dutch explorer Willem Barents discovered Spitsbergen in 1596 while leading an expedition to find a northwest passage to Asia. Blocked by ice, his crew had to spend the winter here and even dismantled a part of the ship in order to survive. Barents himself did not survive. This sea north of Norway now bears his name. It was not until 1838 that the first full-fledged scientific expedition took place. La Recherche, a French corvette, sailed from the port of Le Havre in France up the coast of Norway, then headed for Spitsbergen. The expedition would last for 2 years, during which 80 crew members and 17 scientists, eager for new discoveries, bravely explored these northern regions. Up until then, the rare visitors to Spitsbergen were mainly whalers and trappers. Those days are long gone, but this is still a land of adventure. Heidi is 26. She has been living on Spitsbergen in the Svalbard Islands for 5 years.
This here is quite a rifle. It's a Mauser from the Second World War. It really stands up well to the cold. More recent, lighter rifles tend to seize up when the cold sets in, but there's no problem with this one. At 5 kilos, it's heavy, but you can count on it. I have to do target practice because there's a danger of polar bears. They're all over the Svalbard Islands. Well, there's room for improvement. The polar bear is the largest predator in the islands and is not at all afraid of man. It'll come right up to a group of people without any fear at all. You have to be prepared for unexpected reactions from a polar bear. Some are curious and a little wary, but a large male could charge us just like that.
The Svalbard Islands are situated 840 kilometers north of Norway and 1,300 kilometers from the North Pole. In these inhospitable lands, where the polar night lasts 6 months and temperatures can drop to -50, scientists from all over the world have found a winter wonderland for their research. Longyearbyen, Spitsbergen's one and only town, is the world's northernmost community. It was founded by the early coal miners who braved the Arctic in hope of a better life. Heidi is a teacher and researcher at UNIS, the University of Svalbard.
Here in the Svalbards, you just grab a map and say, where should we go tomorrow? We're right out in the field. No excuse not to go. You just walk 200 meters and you're in the great outdoors.
In her field of research, glaciology, Heidi needs to master the dangers of ice and crevices. She and her students regularly practice the gestures that would save a life if one of them were to fall while out doing field work.
I was attracted to these islands because they have so much to offer. The mountains, the cold, nature right in your face. It makes you feel small compared to nature. I grew up in the French Alps, so I spent my childhood in the mountains, hopping from one peak to another. It's the same here. But here, nature rules your everyday life.
Heidi has found her place and her equilibrium on these unbounded expanses here at the ends of the earth, where every day is a challenge.
There's no distinction between my work and my passion. My work is my passion. It's my life. When I realized that I could make glaciology my profession, I went for it.
Okay, perfect.
In Spitsbergen, the slightest hitch can have enormous consequences, so you have to be prepared for anything. That's why we have so much equipment. We need it to protect ourselves from the polar bears and from avalanches and for rescues. We also need it to determine our position. So a GPS, a satellite phone, and an emergency beacon, which is a simple button you push if you're in trouble that sends a signal to the authorities so they can come and rescue us. It's a lot of gear, but it's all necessary when you're taking students out into the field.
Yeah, fuel card, GPS, yeah. Okay, awesome. Okay, guys, so the plan for today is to do a bit of radar. So we're going to try to do GPR, it is called. It means ground penetrating radar. The scooter will pull the radar. And it looks like a very long antenna, which is
The Svalbards are an ideal laboratory for glaciology,
we will drive maximum
for
at
2/3 of its surface is covered with
So
glaciers.
it's very important to
The university courses are given right on site.
speed constant. And we'll be able to measure how thick the glacier is. And also it will tell us what is the temperature of the ice. So it will be related to how fast a glacier can move to know the temperature of the ice. So it always
We study glaciers because they help us understand the climate.
Et l'Arctique se réchauffe 2 fois plus
The Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world.
beaucoup plus rapidement qu'ailleurs. Et donc étudier
Glaciology not only gives us information about what's happened in the past, it also helps us predict the future.
prédire comment le climat va évoluer. Perfect. Make sure it doesn't fall too hard on the bag here.
Analyzing the glacier's movements is a way to forecast a much more widespread phenomenon, the rising level of the seas on a global scale.
We're off in our own world, our own bubble. Some people think we're doing this because we enjoy it, because we're scientists and we love doing this. But our work has a much larger dimension. Our data will be useful to many populations living on the world's seacoasts. It's a strong motivation.
Vraiment, nous motive tout particulièrement. Hey Alex. Oh, c'est d'amour, hein? Elle est blonde. Blondie. Hey, hey, hey. Ces chiens sont en copropriété.
This is our common dog pool.
4 propriétaires.
There are 3 owners. 2 of the dogs are Alex's and the rest belong to 2 of my friends.
Le reste des chiens. Et aujourd'hui, on va aller faire une petite balade.
Let's take these guys out for a run.
Animaux.
Awakening among evolution, bring the light to pure and prime presence. The smallest to the greatest, the invisible delight around this possible version of things away. Flow in motion drugs, everything on.
I think that's the way she runs, like.
We're just riding on the sled, but these dogs have a sixth sense that keeps us safe. There could be a polar bear or another danger, the ice pack that's too thin or cracked, a glacier that has crevices, for example. The dogs that could sense all that.
Landscapes replaces pictures from the best to new growing elements. The oldest from the youngest, the replacement. Be proud about this magical union everywhere.
The pioneering spirit still lingers in the Svalbards. A whiff of adventure still haunts the ice.
It really gives me a thrill to go right there where no one else goes. I think that fear is basically a fear of the unknown, but for me it's a great motivation. Back then, I would have been the first to hop on a ship headed for the Svalbards, for sure.
The warm Gulf Stream keeps the entire Norwegian coastline free of ice. The fishermen can take to sea all year round, even during the Arctic winter. Aleksander Lyngberg is a child of the far north. This former naval officer, who has sailed all the oceans of the globe, has come back to live in his native land, Finnmark. He's a fisherman in the Barents Sea. He's specialized in giant red king crabs.
Boats have been here for 1 week now. So now we're going to check them and see what it is. There is some catch. Yeah, once we get a really big one. It was over 8 kilos, one crab. It's exciting, you know. What do we catch today? Nothing. There's not so much food in them, but we'll check out the next one and see if there is some catch.
After education, I started working in ships. I went to the US, worked there for a year in Africa and the North Sea, and gets a bit boring. So I went back to the start and started fishing again, be in this beautiful environment.
Better catch. It came originally from Alaska, and in the 60s the Russian put this out here for food for the soldiers. So it has been coming to Norway, and it's going further west every year. It's a nice one. This is about 3 kilos, and it can get about up to 10. When they lose one leg, they will grow up a new one. So it's a weird animal.
The Russians tried several times to introduce crabs to the Arctic Ocean. They failed each time. So they created a new breed, a cross between two very resistant species. Now, the giant red king crab is the largest in the world. It can live 30 years and measure up to 1.50 meters tip to tip. The seafaring tradition in Norway dates back to the time of the Vikings, 1,200 years ago. Those great navigators were among the first to construct boats sturdy enough to venture away from the coasts and sail the open seas. In the extreme north of Europe, beyond the Arctic Circle, lies a vast territory, Lapland. It spreads across parts of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. This is the land of the Sami, nomadic herders. They were the first to set foot on these endless expanses. That was 10,000 years ago. When Aleksander is not out at sea, he spends his time snowkiting. More than a sport, it's an ideal way to cross Lapland's vast frozen stretches.
What I like about living in this environment is the freedom and being together in the nature, the elements around you, and be a part of it. Yeah, that's what I'm living for. I'm living of the nature. I'm fishing for living and kiting for fun.
Snowkiting gives one incredible freedom of movement. You can slide across the plateaus at 80 kilometers an hour, cross frozen seas, climb the slopes. Equipped with a sledge hooked onto his waist, the kiter is totally self-sufficient and can travel for long periods of time, covering hundreds of kilometers. Skiing has existed for more than 4,000 years in the north of Europe. It mainly allowed the Arctic populations to break out of their isolation, to hunt, to tend their herds, and even to go to war. Later, skiing was a key factor in the conquest of the poles.
I love being alone in this big area, this big playground. Yeah, it's a pleasure. You don't think about any worries in the world. It's only you and the kite. Mind get reset. This is the best place on earth for those who like to be outside in the wilderness, especially if you like snowkiting. There is nowhere on earth you can do this like here.
Aleksander is in training for the Vaco race, the toughest snowkite competition in the world, which will take place here in a few days. He and Alf Ole are teammates. They've been training and preparing for 6 months, for the race is a veritable expedition, 300 kilometers through a hostile environment.
We have to get to the high plateau and travel along up there until we get to this valley. The highest point of the valley is right here, and the checkpoint's here.
At Vadsø. That's the finish line.
Yeah. You might get lost if the GPS is not working. Well, you got the wind direction. It's always a good thing. You know the direction. You know then where to go. You know when you are from this area, you're used to it, and you don't see the same way as other people.
The big question mark of the race is the weather. A snowstorm doesn't necessarily mean a good wind. And if there's no wind, the sail can't pull the skier and his sledge. There have been times when not a single team finished the race on account of the lack of wind. So they have to be prepared to continue on foot as far as possible. To take part in the race, it's not enough to know how to handle the sail. You need a lot of experience with long expeditions and bivouacs in extreme conditions. For when night falls, the temperature can plunge to -30. During the long Arctic night, the sky offers a dazzling show. The Sami used to believe that the northern lights were caused by the passage of the cosmic firefox. As he ran across the snow-covered landscape, his tail would graze the snow and throw up sparks. The Sami beliefs have gradually disappeared. but certain traditions remain. There are an estimated 70,000 Sami living in Lapland. Aleksander is paying a visit to two old friends, Sveinung and Lars. They're reindeer herders.
Usually, I don't see anyone out here. But once in a while, some people do pass by. We've set the tent up just because we have a herd of reindeer nearby. This is our base camp.
In this area, I would say most of the people have Sami blood. When you come closer to the coast, it's more mixed with Norwegian, and they do have Sami blood. But we come from a more traditional fishing. The most traditional thing is to do reindeer, but there are some who come more from the coast who are into fishing. So that's where I come from. But in old times it was a bit tricky.
For a long time, the Sami were victims of discrimination. They weren't allowed to speak their own language or practice their rituals. They weren't allowed to sing the yoik, which was the main means of transmitting their knowledge and lore. Lars is a guardian of the traditions. He knows the secrets of the yoik.
I'm going to do a yoik about a wolf. The wolf wanders all over the tundra. He's hungry. He's looking for something to eat. All of a sudden, he hears a reindeer. And then he attacks. That's the end of the story. He catches the reindeer, and that's the end of the yoik.
Those hard times are now past for the Sami. Lapland is now officially recognized by the 4 countries it spans. This territory corresponds, in fact, to the range of the reindeer's migrations. The reindeer spend the winter high on the plateaus, where the ground snow swept by the wind is thinner. The reindeer are not penned up, they're semi-wild. It's been a difficult season for the herders. Aleksander has come to lend a hand.
We need to feed them this winter due to the warm winter. The warm winter made it icy on the snow, so the reindeer don't get through the snow. So we need to give them some extra food. It's important for them to survive this winter, and also to when they give birth.
The successive periods of mild weather followed by cold snaps cause layers of thick ice to build up on the ground. The reindeer can't break through to reach the lichen they usually feed on. They're scattering the hay over the high plateau to disperse the reindeer and avoid conflicts. There are a few hundred reindeer in this herd. As soon as the spring comes, Lars and Sveinung will take down their yurt and follow the reindeer to the rich green pastures on the coastlands, 80 kilometers away.
I really enjoy this work. I could have done a number of other things, but I wouldn't have lasted very long. Here I keep at it. Even if I'm tired, it doesn't matter. Alexander is used to the mountain. He sees right away what needs to be done. He's used to working outdoors in bad weather. He adapts very quickly to the work in the mountain.
Well, the conditions are just about the same as at the sea, you know.
It's even worse at sea, because out at sea you can't make the slightest error.
No, you can't.
Aleksander is doing the final preparations for the race. Given the extreme conditions, forgetting the slightest thing could have disastrous consequences. The rules stipulate that each team be equipped to survive on their own for 5 days. On the Varinger Peninsula in the northernmost part of the country, the plateau rises abruptly to 600 meters above sea level. The tundra remains blanketed in snow until the month of May. The world's top kiters are gathering in this protected zone. The selection procedure for the race is very tough. This is the first time that Aleksander and Alf Ole have qualified.
I feel a little bit stressed and excited, very excited. I can feel it in my stomach. A lot of good kiters around here, so we want to try to get a good start here.
I'm nervous. It's going to be tough, I think. A lot of kites in the air and a lot of lines. 80 kites with 25-meter lines, that's a lot of lines around. The adventure is the goal. We don't give up. We just go.
That's not an option.
I think it's gonna be okay. We are gonna make it good.
40 teams, off and running into the unknown, swept along by the wind of adventure and the desire to break free. Only 24 will make it to the finish line after several days of battling the cold and fatigue, which costs them a staggering effort. Aleksander may feel perfectly at home on this vast territory and know it like the back of his hand. He doesn't manage to make it to the finish line. He does, however, achieve his goal, which was to surpass himself, confront the elements, and become one with nature.
Yeah, this is a good place to go exploring because you can live here a lifetime and have a new place every day, which you haven't been before. It's so huge, you can't go everywhere. Then you have to have a really long life.
Norway means the way to the north. In winter, the Arctic temperatures pose a real challenge to life. The cold is so extreme, it obliterates the horizon. But it doesn't faze the stalwart souls here. For some, it's even a source of inspiration. Terje Isungset is one of those for whom nature is both muse and work of poetry.
Musically, I find nature very, very inspiring. Like when we came to this place, the first thing I hear is the beautiful sound of this river. The mixture of half-frozen river, you know, of ice and not ice. The sound is amazing. When I work on compositions, I might include sounds from water, from birds, from fishes, whales. For me as a musician, it's very important to express something. It will not be a concrete expression that people might understand, but it's for sure, for me, it's very important.
We're almost there, guys.
Will we be able to climb onto the glacier?
Yes, but we won't need to climb on top to get inside the glacier.
Okay, let's get a look at this ice.
Terje and his team have come to the Jostedalsbreen Glacier in the south of Norway. Here, on one of the 50 arms of Europe's largest glacier, he's planning to carry out an imaginative new project, creating and recording his music right inside a glacier.
This is a dream. Can you take a chunk? Do you have room in your backpack? Nice sound, huh?
I think it's amazing to see this glacier ice. It's fantastic. The color is beautiful. If it has sound or not, I cannot tell you yet. We need to make pieces and check them. But it looks like it's a little bit too much air and not so compact, kind of. But if we manage to find a cave or something underneath the glacier, it probably will be better ice. Oh. It's first time ever I'm in an ice cave. And First of all, I think it's incredibly beautiful. The light is very unique. I've never seen blue color like this before. And also there are some instruments here, ready-made. Kind of. It's amazing, isn't it?
Terje came up with the idea of using ice in his musical creations in 1999, when he was composing for a concert at the foot of a frozen waterfall. Ever since, he's been working tirelessly to perfect his art. His instruments, all made of ice, are inventions that spring straight from his imagination, like the isophone. Bernard Svidal is Terje's assistant. His help is precious because before each performance, the instruments have to be made from scratch.
It's beautiful. It's a piece of art, made by nature.
That's good. But this one should be a little higher. Like this.
Each setup for a concert or a recording session is a long, delicate process.
I want to tune it. And then I take off.
Here we have more sound, so we leave it as it is.
What happened was that when I heard the sound and saw the beauty of ice, I kind of fell in love with it immediately and just had to continue the work simply. It's not like if you have a Stradivarius violin, you know exactly how it sounds. With the ice, when I make a new instrument, I don't even know what sound it is. So, and let the instrument or the sound show me where to go musically.
Terje is from Yelo, a village in the center of Norway. He spends most of his time on tour. He gives 150 concerts a year all over the world. He travels everywhere with his ice, by car and even by plane.
For me, life has been simple in the way that I think I always knew I would deal with music. I couldn't see any choice or any other options. So I started to play on garbage around 5, 6 years old. But when I was 8, I got my first drum kit. But I have no musical education except for performing and kind of searching myself.
During the winter, Bernard has the job of harvesting enough ice for a year's worth of performances. The ice is fragile. It's a very difficult operation. He has to work barehanded on a frozen lake at a temperature of -15.
The quality of the ice will make a good quality ice music instrument. You can use artificial ice for sculptures and structures, but you cannot make the artificial ice and make instruments out of it. No tunes will come out of it.
That's maybe 90% of the work, to find the good ice. I was in Russia. We had 100 pieces of ice from the same lake, and only 7 of them had sound. The best sounding ice I've ever had in my life is the ice from 2003 from north of Sweden. I say it's like good wine, you know, this is a really good year. You can go to the same lake that had the best ice in 2003, and this year maybe no sound.
The more complex instruments are produced in Terje's workshop. The material is as fragile as it is precious. Each performance is unique, as are these ephemeral instruments. Terje is a trailblazer. With the heart of the glaciers, he composes a new horizon. His creations give voice to the wondrous, enchanting sounds of the realm of ice.
So it's been really hard work, I must say, but I think it's worth every second of it. I think most of the music kind of have showed up. It's not music that I have heard, that I try to copy, or things like this. So it's feel more like a part of me, or I am a part of the music.
Scotland. Its breathtaking landscapes are like a vision from the ends of the earth. At the outer limits of Europe, buffeted by storms, this land of islands, mountains, and lakes stirs the imagination. The Hebrides, an archipelago west of the British Isles, were hewn out by the harsh forces of the ocean. The heart of these Gaelic lands beats with the pulse of an age-old culture. The whims of geology have isolated the inhabitants and forged their insular character. The Hebrides, these scattered bits of emerged land, have always been the protected domain of seabirds. The Highlands are a paradise for lovers of majestic, unspoiled nature. These are the legendary mountains of Scotland, a world unto itself, suspended in time. The island of Tiree is unlike any of the other Hebrides Islands. They say it's the sunniest spot in Scotland, certainly the windiest. On Tiree, the sheep greatly outnumber the people. Proud of its Gaelic tradition, the island of Tiree owes its reputation to the pluck of the fishermen and its plentiful lobsters. On Tiree, nobody knows Alistair MacLean, and yet he was born here and has never left. Like almost all the children on the island, Alistair inherited a nickname when he was very young. Billy. Billy the Box, his true identity.
I suppose everybody's got their own version of that story, but obviously my proper name is Alistair, of course. Billy, I've not actually sure how it came about. It was something to do with my father. He got the ball rolling as far as me being called Billy. And of course, Billy the Box comes with the accordion, as we know it in Ireland, it's called the box. And when I was in my young teenage years, I was doing quite a bit of music in the house, in neighbours' houses and whatnot, you know, with the accordion. So it was Billy the Box that stood, you know, that stuck like glue.
Every summer, 7,000 lambs are rounded up for Tiree's sheep fair. It marks the end of their carefree existence.
Wait.
The rest of the year, they run free. Everyone farms and raises sheep here. It's the islanders' main source of revenue, along with fishing and tourism in the summer. Today, Billy has come to help out Colin, his young neighbor. Here, even more than in other parts, cooperation and teamwork form the bedrock of the community.
That's the way it should be, and the way it really works on the island. We try and look after one another, and again, I know the likes of Colin. I could phone Colin up at 4 o'clock in the morning and he would come and give me assistance with no questions asked. And that's the way it should be, and it makes life an awful lot easier when we're working along with one another.
Bye-bye. Goodbye.
I remember in particular getting the October holidays from school, which was known locally as the potato holidays. That was the time when the potatoes went home. So you got your fortnight's holiday and you'd you would dig your own potatoes and put them home, and you'd say, well, thank goodness that's over and done with. On the following day, you were marched over the road to give your neighbour a hand. So it was quite, it was done, and we never thought anything of it. So we all helped one another. (1963, I believe. Which is quite old. Yeah.
In the Hebrides, everything seems to flow naturally and timelessly. Even Billy the Box's old tractor knows the way to the sea. Billy, who's 52, owns 2 tractors, a dozen cows, 20 sheep, and a few patches of land to grow what he needs to feed himself and his animals. The bare necessities. At low tide, he goes down to the beach to gather what the sea has to offer.
What nature gives you, you're making use of it. I mean, it comes in here for a reason, so why not make the use of it? The old folk, my father and my ancestors long before that, they all used to come down and gather the seaweed. Modern fertiliser wasn't quite so available then, and it's pricey. It costs a lot to bring the fertiliser in and to spread it and all the rest of it. I try to get as much as possible. It's not always here, mind you. It comes and goes, depending on the wind and the tide it brings it in, and this is the best stuff I've seen for a long, long time. It's beautiful stuff, absolutely beautiful stuff.
Quality Street back to Telford Road just seems to be a volume of traffic. And an accident on the A71 Calder Road blocking a lane westbound between the City Bypass and Rickerton Mains Road. Now the accident is westbound but very slow here in both directions.
Billy is a farmer, a musician, and a sheep raiser. But he wears even one more hat. His days all start off very early, for he has another mission to carry out on the island. To be able to live on Tiree, Billy, like many men and women here, has more than one job. For more than 20 years, he's been one of the island's 3 postmen.
Quite often it's bills they get and junk mail, as I say, but whatever, it keeps me in work anyway.
Even if there are only 600 inhabitants on Tiree, his round can't wait. Billy the postman is a man in a hurry, but he always exchanges a friendly word with those he meets on the way.
Nice day, isn't it? A good day, aye. How are you, wee doggy? I hope this weather lasts anyway.
It's a nice spell, isn't it?
Aye.
A bit of shelter.
Yes.
The sun and shelter. It's nice, like a summer's. A summer's
Better than
day.
the summer.
Right.
See you later.
Cheerio then. All right.
Well, yes, they've certainly known me. I've been in the job over 26 years, so they've got to know me. And even if a lot of new faces come to the island and, you know, they get to know the postman, that's pretty quickly kind of thing. Again, you're at the door every day kind of thing, so, yeah. So, yes, it's all part of the job.
In the Hebrides, the range of temperatures and the force of the wind are in a class of their own. Out in his shirt sleeves, as always, Billy faces the morning chill without a shiver, disproving the old Scottish saying, "There's no such thing as bad weather, just the wrong gear."
As a tidy resident and born and bred here, this is only a small breeze. This is actually quite a pleasant day, believe it or not. I would reckon, honestly speaking, you're as close to nature as you can get living out in a little island. You've got to be. You've got to face the elements every day. You get some good days, some nice days, but you can get some very, very bad days as well, where, again, you're at the mercy of the elements. What you can do, when you can do it, if you can do it.
The inhabitants of Tiree are proud of their island's reputation as the windiest spot in Scotland. But sometimes the reality surpasses this banal tourist slogan. In the Western Islands, the rain and wind have two fearsome allies, the swell and the waves. In Scotland, the winter storms swing from rage to fury. Today, Billy has donned his rain gear. He's going to lend a hand to the skipper of the Atlantis, one of Tyree's 7 small fishing boats. Every Sunday, the fishermen haul in the week's catch, tons of shellfish carefully kept alive in creels. Crabs, lobster, prawn, velvet crabs, the waters off Tiree are known to be very rich in nutrients. What's more, there's no overfishing. They know how to protect their treasure here. The holding pools are sheltered from the swell just a few meters from the rocky shore. Ross, the skipper, has no room for error, but the job has to be done no matter what the conditions of the sea. Because the island is so isolated, the fishermen can ship their catch out only once a week, and Sunday is the one day a truck comes onto the island to load up the produce.
When you live in a small community, you've got to be readily available to give somebody a hand or receive help. And this island, we're very, very fortunate in that we're a close-knit community. I can be down in the harbour within 10 minutes to give Ross a hand, or Callum, or Angus, or Neil, whatever. So we've got to work together. You can't get help from anywhere else but from your community.
For the fishermen, it's a race against time. Once they dock, they have just a few hours to sort and weigh the impressive quantities of crabs, prawns, and lobster before nightfall.
That's a big one, isn't it? Yeah, aye. That's a good size. He's probably 10-year-old, that one. 10-year-old. Maybe more.
The truck has just pulled onto the wharf. In the morning, it will arrive in Oban on the Scottish mainland. From there, it will embark on a long trip to southern Europe. Everything caught in the waters off Tyre is sold in Spain, the world's 5th largest consumer of seafood. But before arriving in sunny Spain, the precious cargo has to be hand-packaged under the watchful eye of Sam, the Scots exporter.
Tyre is one of the best islands on the west coast, if not in Scotland, for quality of shellfish. You know, the quality of velvets, the quality of lobsters, the quality of brown crabs. We put them in tanks of water with an air system blowing. We have an engine that runs an air pump that puts air into the tanks, which oxygenates the water and hopefully keeps them alive. You know, hopefully, most of the time they're alive. You know, we need more money. Okay, Europeans? Never mind Brexit, we're still friends. More money, okay?
I'm born and bred here, and my father was from the island. My mother's, she's from the island, so I suppose I'm as true Tyre blood as you can get. Tyre is my home and always will be my home, and when you look around, it's not a bad little place really. It never crossed my mind to ever leave the island. I was quite happy to stay on here, and when my late father retired, I carried on with the crofting, so that was me tied here. But I've no regrets whatsoever. This is where I wanted to be, and I hope I'll be here for a few years yet.
In the Hebrides, only about 10 of the islands are inhabited, like Tyre, Billy the Box's island. The entire archipelago is made up of over 500 islands and islets. Most of them are completely protected. Some were abandoned at the beginning of the 20th century. Cut off from the rest of the world, these patches of Gaelic land have become a paradise for migratory birds. Laura Robertson is on her way to the island of Barra, in the Outer Hebrides. The small local airport is one of a kind. The pilots who do the run between mainland Scotland and the Hebrides have to check the tide charts before they land here. The landing strip emerges 2 times a day at low tide. Laura is an ornithologist. She's just stopping over on Barra on her way to her final destination, the island of Mingulay, where she'll plunge into an experience quite out of the ordinary, living on her own on a deserted island.
Yeah, it's just a fantastic opportunity to get away to somewhere really remote and challenging to live on. There's no shop round the corner to get your groceries from, and yeah, you know, when the weather's bad, you just kind of have to batten down the hatches and do your best to get the work done. Yeah, I think to spend time alone on remote islands like that, you have to have an awareness of yourself. You need to be able to sort of know when you're feeling a bit down or whatever, and not let things get to you too much.
Laura's crossing to the island is scheduled for tomorrow morning. She has been preparing to leave civilization for several weeks, but tonight, Laura is already somewhere else, off on her island.
Yeah, I'm just interested about the place that I'm going to be living on for the next 3 months. Want to find out more. You know, there are lots of stories about Mingulay that people on Barra can tell you. And it sort of whets the appetite to learn more before I go and live there myself.
Spent years working in an accountant's office. Then one day she decided to give it all up and strike out in a new direction. Now her work consists of studying the behavior of seabirds in the heart of the Scottish wilds. But at dawn, the crossing to Mingulay is looking doubtful.
Hi there. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Are you Donald?
I'm Donald, yes.
Yeah, hi there, I'm Laura. I'm looking to get a boat across to Mingulay, and I've been told you're the person to see.
Yeah, that's me. That is the boat trips to Mingulay, but the weather's not very good for going today.
Oh, okay. When do you think it
Well,
might
I'm hoping to go
improve?
tomorrow.
Okay. How long does it take to get across there?
About an hour.
About an hour.
Depends on the weather.
Okay. When do you think the weather's going to
Well,
improve?
the forecast looks better for tomorrow, so hopefully tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Okay, so just come down to the boat.
Donald MacLeod was skipper of a boat that fished the waters between Scotland and the Faroe Islands for more than 30 years. He's the only sailor around who goes to Mingulay from time to time.
No, there's no harbour, no, and it's not very sheltered. There's always a bit of swell there, so it's got to be a very good day to land.
To take to the sea in Scotland, you have to seize the calm spells, the rare moments when the ocean takes a breather. This time, Laura is really on her way. She won't be back to the port of Barra before the end of the summer. She can say goodbye to the modern world and its conveniences. There's no turning back now.
How to prepare for Mingulay, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's entirely possible, but yeah, I've been on different islands before, none as remote or ambitious as Mingulay. You know, it's not just about the work that you're doing, it's about living here and being here and making the most of your time out here and the experience, and yeah.
Passing beneath the cliffs, Laura discovers her new turf. There's even a welcoming committee. The seals are right at home on Mingulay. Usually there's nothing to disturb them, so they're intrigued by this new arrival.
over there is the house that I'm going to be spending the next 3 months in, living and working out of. It's the old schoolhouse that's been done up by the Western Isles Ranger who works for the National Trust of Scotland. So I'm quite excited to see, you know, my new home for the summer. Okay, cheers.
Donald won't come back with his boat for the next 3 months, unless Laura needs emergency supplies. From now on, this is her island. Mingulay was not always devoid of human life. For ages, men and women lived here, scraping out a meager existence from the harsh environment. In 1912, the last inhabitants abandoned the islands to the birds. 180 people were still living on the island at the end of the 19th century. They survived thanks to a bit of livestock, some fishing, and, when times got hard, bird hunting. Back then, there was even a school on Mingulay, with 48 children enrolled.
So the sort of main part of the village is here in the bay. You can see where the sand starts and then the village starts. There are still quite a lot of remains of all the different houses here. You know, some in better condition than others. Further along, above the village, you have the old church that was built relatively recently in the island's history.
Scurvy, fever, and infant mortality finally outweighed the courage of the Mingulay Islanders.
Locations like this, islands like this, are very much a part of the history of the people that have lived on the Hebrides in the past and are living there now, and is very much still part of their lives, I think.
The only thing that Laura shares with that distant past is the island's single source of fresh water. For centuries, it allowed people to live here far from the rest of the world. Laura has settled in quickly and organized her time. For weeks, she'll be hiking the island's hills and cliffs, following the path of the wind and living in harmony with the colonies of birds.
Just to know that everything matters now. Sitting and watching, keeping my head high.
By leading a free existence without constraints, this ornithologist is living out a dream that many people have: to live on a deserted island like a modern-day Robinson Crusoe.
A definite distance from, you know, my normal life as such on the mainland, but at the same time it never feels too far away. 3 months is no time at all, really. Before you know it, the seabirds will be leaving the cliffs, monitoring will be drawing to a close, and it will be time for me to go back to the mainland again and leave Mingulay behind me. Yeah, it will come quicker than I can imagine.
Laura hikes several kilometers every day to get to the bird rookeries of Mingulay. She has learned how to coexist with her only neighbors.
This is their beach more than mine. I'm only here temporarily over the summer. They sort of spend their entire winter and summer in these waters and on the shores. So yeah, I'm just a visitor really. You'll be walking along the coastline on lower sort of rocky areas, thinking you're all alone, and then this little head pops up and, oh, who are you? And as, yeah, just really inquisitive, wants to sort of see what you're up to and follows you about the coast a little bit. Closest neighbours are the seals, which is fantastic.
You have to be in good shape to do ornithology. Mingulay is an island of stone and peat, and it's not always easy to get around. From their height of 220 meters, the cliffs look down onto the vast Atlantic Ocean. The birds have made this vertical cliff face their domain, a refuge in the sky for nesting between migrations. Laura can't afford to be afraid of heights. She spends hours perched up on these vertiginous cliffs, among the highest in Scotland.
It's probably one of the most impressive spots that I monitor at in terms of you're up quite high, so for a lot of the birds you're looking straight down on top of them. So the sort of first visit here was, yeah, kind of took my breath away a little bit. Yeah, it's got a good mixture of seabirds here as well, so it's not just a couple of species. We've got kittiwakes, razorbills, guillemots, fulmars, and also some shags low down that with the scope we can actually monitor as well.
Laura works for the National Trust for Scotland, an association that manages Scotland's natural and cultural riches. Right now, she's taking a detailed census of the bird populations. This exhaustive inventory will allow them to better conserve and protect the different species of birds. The northern fulmar, a tireless ocean traveler. It spends most of its time on the high seas, far from human eyes. The great squaw. Its fierce beak is capable of killing its fellow creatures in order to eat or defend its nest. On Mingulay, Laura can enjoy the beauty of this wild world from a front row seat.
Who is this strange person every day coming to this cliff? What is this strange creature staring at me but not doing anything? Yeah, who knows what they're thinking. In remote locations like this, there's no mobile phone signal, so you can't call for help. So one of the first things I was equipped with is a location kind of tracker, basically. So I press that first thing in the morning when I'm heading out, and when I return, I press it again. You know, if I tripped and broke my ankle when I was in the middle of the island, I can press that and it goes straight to the Coast Guard. So they would come out to help me. I think the best safety feature is don't take risks. On a good day, it is beautiful, and yeah, it's lovely to spend time in places like this, really special places, with wildlife as special as this. It's fantastic. Completely different personality in different weathers though, so yeah, when it's a raging gale, it's not quite so friendly, not quite so peaceful, but yeah, it's a beautiful, stunning place. I'm lucky to be here, working here.
It's the end of the summer. After 3 months of isolation, Laura has finished her work on Mingvellir. Now she's eager to be off to another island for her next mission. Further east, far from the influence of the ocean, we discover an entirely different facet of Scotland. These are the cairngorms in the center of the Highlands.
Trying to pull you up now, but not pull you down now.
121, 49, 79, 115, 40, 72, 126, 68.
Emma O'Shea is a mountaineer, plucky and tireless.
Ready!
Today, she and her faithful friend Moth are taking part in a famous mountain run through the Cairngorms National Park.
I never knew what I wanted to do, and sometimes I still don't know what I want to do, but the one thing that I do know is that I wanted to work outside. I enjoy my way of life. Some people would not like it at all, but for me it is the right way of life, and I could not imagine being inside all day long, looking outside of the window at what is happening outside. So for me, I'm very happy. I like when the weather is very wet or very windy. It is still fun to go outside in the mountains and in the forests. And when the weather is good, that is a bonus.
With a height difference of 1,600 meters, this competition is a grueling 2-hour run in the cold and damp. But what makes Emma run? Emma, who was born in the north of England and moved to Scotland when she was 16, spends her time clambering up these rocky slopes. She studied geology, but now works as a mountain guide. Welcome to the world of Emma. In Scotland, the further north you go, away from the center, the sparser the population. The highlands seem to exist on the outer limits of the known world. It's a series of lakes inhabited by legendary monsters, bald mountains, and age-old forests. This is where Emma stokes her imagination and her dreams of mountains.
My first trip was nearly 20 years ago abroad, and that was to the Alps, to Chamonix. And I did a tour of Mont Blanc. And after that, I have gone to the Himalayas, to Nepal and India, and to the Andes as well. And I love to see the mountains, but not just the mountains, it's very much the mountain people, the people who live there when I go to visit. And I always say I go to see the mountains, but I remember the people I've talked to along the way, who live the lives that I like to live. It's not too bad.
Here, Emma is leading a small group of middle schoolers. Today's expedition will take them into the foothills of the highlands on the edge of the Cairngorms National Park. The program of the day, fieldwork in the open air.
Because I don't want to end up having rocks in my bag.
That is a cluster. Who's waiting for a cluster of trees? So take a mattock and a spade and 5 trees with each group to start with. There you go. Okay.
Emma is a volunteer in an association whose goal is to make the young people aware of the need to reforest Scotland's mountains.
So today we're planting hazel trees back onto a hill where there hasn't been any trees for hundreds of years, and it was man who cut down the trees for homes, for building and for animals, and now we've got an opportunity to put them back. And it means a lot to me because the trees are very important, they're very good for the wildlife and they're very good for people. So it's really it makes me very happy to be able to have the opportunity to come out and put some trees back onto the hillside.
The reforestation project is part of the curriculum in the Highlands middle schools. The students learn that thousands of years ago, these bald mountains were covered in forests.
A writer and a reindeer.
Well, for me, it's good for volunteering and like for my future. And it's good to have you on your CV. It's a good experience, and it's maybe leading me on to something in my future, a career. Yeah, I'll come and see the progress in maybe 20 years or so and see how much they've grown and if it's successful or not. Yeah.
That looks good. That's good. How many trees have you done? 10. So 20 to hot chocolate. When you look around, there are already some trees that are maybe up to almost 1 metre from the ground, and they weren't here 10, 15 years ago. So very much by the time that everyone here is very old, there will be a small forest that they can come back to see. That is what we hope very much.
In winter, the mountains can change their aspect in just a few minutes. At this latitude, a patch of bad weather can send the temperatures plunging or quickly turn into a storm.
Hello.
The mountaineers know where to take shelter. In the bothies, rudimentary huts built all over the highlands. A roof, 4 corrugated iron walls, and a wood-burning stove to heat water for tea. Bothies are part and parcel of Scottish culture. Robert Scott, a pioneer in mountaineering in Scotland, is a legend in this region. In the 1950s, he was one of the first to blaze trails in the highlands.
Well, nowadays, at my age, I'm now 89, and I've got a touch of arthritis, so I can't manage to climb the mountains, but I still love to be amongst them and see the mountains. That's the main thing. And write about the good old days when I used to go climbing. So, and hope when I've written, this is my 4th book, so I might manage to write another 1 or 2 before I reach 100, before I reach my century.
Emma could have taught geology, her first profession, or worked in a laboratory. But ever since the first time her father took her to the highlands when she was 8, she has had her head filled with dreams of adventure, mountains, and wide open spaces. For 20 years now, she's been exploring the heart of the highlands off the beaten path. Emma has, in fact, custom-tailored a profession for herself, guiding hikers and climbers who, like herself, are in love with Scotland's natural treasures.
It is like coming back in time. There is nobody here, and there are just the ruins of the castle surrounded by old trees. It's mysterious and magical, and it's a very special place to be. The castle's got a brilliant story. It dates from the 1500s, but there was a story there was fighting between two families, the Forbes and the Gordons. And the Gordons had the castle. And one day, the sons, there were 7 sons, they'd been sent out to cut peat, and the peat was used for heat in the 1500s. But the enemy, the Forbes, came along and they slaughtered every single one of the sons, and they cut their heads off. And then they put their heads on stakes and left them in the field. It's really, really gruesome. But it has an even sadder ending, because when the word came back to the father at the castle, he is said to have fallen down the stairs in the building and died here where we're stood. This is one of my favourite mountains. It's one of the Munros. It's a mountain over 3,000 feet in height, and this height is 3,554 feet. But the view from the top is absolutely stunning. We can see the whole of Scotland from here.
The Munro Mountains are one of Scotland's wildest territories. 9 peaks, among which is Ben Nevis, the highest mountain in the British Isles. Emma is starting the ascent of Schiahallion, a legendary summit. Everyone in Scotland knows its name. Mount Schiahallion went down in history 300 years ago for a surprising reason.
It's a really interesting story. It goes back to 1774, and they decided to use this mountain to see if they could measure the weight of the earth. And the mountain was chosen because it's completely conical in shape, and it was quite a uniform mountain. And they decided that if they came up onto this mountain and carried out lots of experiments using a plumb line and Newton's law of gravity, they would be able to work out how much the earth weighs. And they were successful.
After months of training, Emma has attained her holy grail. She has been accepted into Scottish Mountain Rescue, a select team of 800 volunteers who help people in trouble. It's easy to get lost in the Munros.
Mountain rescue is something I've always wanted to do, going onto the mountains in the night or in the snow and the blizzard and being able to bring somebody back is very special. It's a very special thing to do. In our team there are 50 people, maybe less than 5%, maybe less than 2% in every team are female, just a small number. And we come together, and the thing that we all share is mountain rescue and that we want to help people in the mountains. It is a cliche. I always felt I would like to put something back, and I have worked outside and I have built mountain footpaths and I have planted many trees. But to be able to save other people, it means a lot to me, a very, very big lot to me.
It's for these moments that Emma decided to become a mountain guide. Nothing and no one can take these deeply satisfying moments away from her. For Emma, there's no need to travel to the ends of the earth to find adventure. This young woman in love with her mountains has chosen to make her life a long voyage on the paths of her own freedom.
It's just wonderful just to sit and let the world stop. we spend a lot of time rushing around, and it is lovely to be here outside, surrounded by the mountains and the water, and to stop and just to spend the time with the fire and with friends sometimes, or also on my own as well, or with the dog too. For other people, they would think this is not 5-star at all, but for me it is, and it is very special to feel that way. This is much better than a 5-star hotel. This is very real for me.
Sometimes the ocean needs to blow off steam. Off the point of Brittany in western France, the sea flexes its muscles with a harsh beauty. Fascinated by this impressive display, one could almost forget the danger. Storms are spellbinding, a wild fantasy for land dwellers, a tragic menace for sailors. The fishermen of the tumultuous Ras de Seine are both humble and brave in their pursuit of a noble prey. Others, intrepid storm hunters, track the bad weather in huge waves as they push themselves to their limit in their never-ending search for the absolute.
Don't go there. The least problem, you'll end up on the rocks.
Every winter, Brittany is buffeted by storms. Here, the foam and black rocks, caught up in the shifting light and currents, mark the land's end. The Ras de Seine is a passage 6 kilometers wide between the Pointe du Raz and the island of Seine. For sailors, this is Brittany's most dangerous spot, an infamous passage. Twice a day, the surface of the water turns into a churning treadmill. When the Iroise Sea and the English Channel fill up and empty, the powerful tides give birth to one of Europe's strongest currents. The Ras de Seine is an immense torrent that plows into a barrier of submerged rocks. Only a few brave souls dare venture here. If the Vieille Lighthouse could speak, it would tell just how violent and brutal the ocean can be. Most of the time, the spectacle of the Ras plays to an empty house. There have been no lighthouse keepers here for a long time. Here we see the evacuation of the last residents of the Ras de Seine. The lighthouse keepers, stationary sailors, had a front row seat, but the final curtain came down for them in December 1995 with the last shift change. They were the guardian angels of the Ras de Seine and the local fishermen.
It was better when the keepers were there. The door was open. We could see them going up and down. It was a presence. Now the door is always closed, and the spot is even more hostile.
Only the fishermen remain. For 40 years, a handful of daring men have been risking their lives to work in this swirl of foam and rocks.
We get scared. Sometimes very scared.
Olivier Mayville is an old salt of the point, a hard-headed sailor, an aristocrat of fishing. Six months of the year, he fishes for sea bass, the most expensive and sought-after fish found along the French coasts.
There's a noble side to our profession, the contact with the elements. To do this work, you have to, above all, love the sea. And you also have to have some nerve, because you're fishing in rough seas. It's a tough, dangerous profession, especially in places like Radisson, where we fish. You have to know these spots. You can't just come stumbling in here.
Olivier is the captain of the Mundaka. He's one of the few who dare tackle the waves of the Ras de Seine. Only about a dozen fishermen come here. It's no place for amateurs, veterans only. Aboard his little boat, Olivier can count only on himself. One hand for the rod, the other for the boat, and both eyes peeled.
You have to keep the boat on course, and above all, avoid running a beam to the waves. That's when the boat is the most vulnerable. You really have to slide down the back of the wave, or do a quick U-turn and point the bow right into the waves. That's how you minimize the risks. Most of the people out here are locals, and you really have to know the ropes. You can't just sail in here without knowing something about the spot in the sea. These are very dangerous waters. There have been a lot of accidents, and it's really a profession where you have to respect the sea and not take risks when it's too rough.
Olivier is a craftsman of the sea. He respects what it offers. Rod and reel fishing is a duel between man and sea. It's also a somewhat monastic work that goes from sunrise to sunset. You catch sea bass one by one in a silent waiting game. And when the swell rises, the Ras de Seine becomes a road of suffering. After his studies in marine biology, Olivier could have ended up in a lab, but he chose to take up rod and reel to pursue Brittany's most coveted fish, line-caught sea bass. Today, the sea is too rough for fishing, a boat-breaking, man-breaking sea. Olivier is in close contact with the elements. The weather always has the last word. Olivier never forgets that people have lost their lives here in the Ras. This kind of fishing is no game. Our Lady of the Shipwrecked is there to remind sailors that the contest taking place at her feet has its rules.
We're always on our toes because the fish are out there and you have to go after them when you can. Sometimes we'll be stuck in port for several days, so as soon as we can get out, even if it's for only half a day, we go. We'll take a look and maybe think, hey, it's good today, we have a window. Then we take the boat and go. If we have 3-4 hours, we can get lucky and get a decent day's catch.
In the early morning, after 2 days at dockside, Olivier can at last leave the port of Odierne, an hour from the Ras de Seine. Being drawn to the element of chance is not enough to make a rod and reel fisherman. One has to be ready for combat and sacrifice. Alone on board the Mundaka, Olivier is totally concentrated, like a boxer about to climb into the ring. A boxer/rodeo rider. He'll have to take the blows, but dish them out as well. Bob and weave, thrust and parry.
We wait for the birds to come feeding at the surface. It's a sign that there are sea bass. You see, they prey on mackerel and sardines that flee to the surface. So, I have to cast my line inside the school while cutting through the waves. And there, you have a sort of barrier of 3 or 4 big standing waves you have to get past. And you really do not want to get parallel to the waves. You can't make the slightest error. There's a lot of tension. You have to keep an eye on the other boats. You have to watch out for the others, and at the same time go over the right spot to try to catch the fish. Look, I got one. If it were that easy, the sea would have been fished out a long time ago. It's all part of the game. It also means that the fish stand a chance.
For Olivier, every day out at sea is a win. In spite of the constant risks and hardships, he has learned to appreciate the watery world that surrounds him and adapt to a life that is hard, but which he has chosen.
I do this because I love it. I think you have to love it to do this kind of work. It takes up a lot of time. Yet, you're on the water and have that feeling of freedom. The weather and the fish call the shots out here. It's really a magnificent, unspoiled spot. Fishing is, when you come down to it, a man, a boat, and a rod. It's really a pure and wonderful profession. Maybe we take it for granted because we live it every day, but it's our passion and we're hooked. It's really wonderful to work in a site like the Pointe du Raz.
In this light, you could almost forget how dangerous the Raz de Seine is. Yet this beauty should not diminish the worth of the men who confront it.
Raging weather, as we call it, is when you get a wind blowing between force 9 and force 12. Off the Wesson Island, at the mouth of the channel, we had 20-meter waves. And we did rescues in these 20-meter waves. Yes, it brings back fond memories. That's for sure. And sometimes I dream about it. I don't know why. But I'm back on board. And I'm not 50 or 55 like when I retired. I'm 75, like I am now. And it's strange. Well, it's just a dream.
Jean Bulot is known as Captain Storm. He commanded a legendary boat, l'Abbé Flandre, a tug rescue boat capable of standing up to Brittany's most extreme conditions to help ships in trouble. Jean is now looking back on his life as a sailor and the places marked by his adventures as a rescue worker. Jean and the rescue crew from Port-Salle are headed for the Four Channel in the Iroise Sea, where a maritime catastrophe changed his life. Here, in this zone bristling with shoals, is where his career as a rescue worker began in the late 1970s, a few days after one of the worst shipwrecks on the coast of Brittany, the wreck of the Amoco Cadiz. The oil tanker was over 300 meters long and broke in two, spewing forth thousands of tons of oil.
You have to imagine yourself in the middle of all that, the waves crashing into the cliffs, a boat that's drifting and about to run aground on the rocks. Luckily, the Amico accident happened at night. They didn't see it, or they'd have jumped overboard.
For Jean, it's highly symbolic to return to the spot where the tanker went down. He recalls his blind rage. In short, it was the wreck of that ship that changed Captain Bulot's life. He became a rescue worker, captain of the first high-seas tug rescue boat based in Brittany, so that the sea would never again be tainted with oil. Adventures written in seawater are not forgotten. Jean is heir to the Cape Horners and the long-distance sailing captains. 400 years and 16 generations of navigators have forged his character. Jean became a writer, and he draws his material from his adventurous life. A tireless teller of sea yarns, he has a seafarer's gaze and saltwater memories. His next book will once again take him to this land of mist and lighthouses. Jean is on his way to the island of Molène, where he's going to share his memories of storms and rescues. He's with Chris, his projectionist. Today, he's going to show a movie to the 13 children of the island's one school. Jean wants to transmit the human values of sea rescue to the younger generation.
They take big risks, especially the men on the aft deck. Most of the time they don't see the wave coming because they're busy with something else. So there's the old saying, one hand for yourself and one hand for the boat. And when someone does notice something, they'll communicate with gestures or shouting because there's so much noise around with the engines and the wind. It's not even worth using walkie-talkies or the intercom. They wouldn't hear anything. And it's very dangerous because the men aren't secured. They don't use harnesses. Above all on the aft deck when they're moving around and a huge wave washes over, it covers everything, and the guys can get tossed around, and the steel cables can start lashing around. The guy can't get free, and he can be cut in two or swept overboard.
The rescue boat goes into action as soon as a ship is in trouble. They say that these sailors, from the captain to the deckhand, are willing to put their life on the line in order to save the lives of others. They're anonymous heroes in the heart of a storm. In the course of his career at sea, Jean Bulot has assisted 200 ships in distress.
Did you have any rescue that were really difficult?
Yes, nearly all the rescues were difficult because they always took place in bad weather. For over 15 years, I carried out rescues along with my crew, of course, because the captain is nothing without his crew. When a boat asks for help, it means they're already in trouble. So we go out to help. We don't care about the weather or the size of the boat. Our objective is to save the crew and after the boat.
Jean pushes on with his voyage between the mainland and the islands of Molène and Ouessant. He feels right at home in the ship's bridge. It's where he spent his life.
Abby Bourbon, come in. This is from Vertu.
Coming into the island of Ouessant, he is struck by an ironic twist of history. The Abbé Bourbon, the tugboat that replaced Captain Bulot's Abbé Flandre, is there moored in the shelter of the cliffs, all ready to face the next storm.
Here we're facing the Molène Islands with the Carillon Lighthouse. Over there, that's the Fontvert Channel, running between Ouessant and the Molène Islands and Carillon. They say this spot has a bad bottom with all of its... It has lots of shoals, rocks, currents, nasty seas. It's a very dangerous zone. At Saint, you have the Vieille Lighthouse in the Ras de Saint. Over there's Armen at the tip of the Chaussée de Saint. Then there's the Pierre Noire, Black Rocks, which enables you to avoid the rocks around Molène. Those were all legendary lighthouses. You realize that lighthouse keepers would stay out there for a week at a time, sometimes two, when they couldn't change on account of the weather. Now it's somewhat better, but it was really acrobatic. Plus, your morale had to be pretty solid to stay out there. Personally, I'd rather be out on the water than in a lighthouse.
It makes one wonder just how the lighthouses can remain standing when the wind whips up the sea like this. One of the greatest concentrations of lighthouses and sunken wrecks can be found around the islands of Finistère. Ouessant is also known as Sentinel Island, further proof of how dangerous shoals have always been for seafarers. From its height of 55 meters, Créache, the most imposing lighthouse, dominates the cliffs and fogs, and still guides the ships sailing off the coast of Brittany. In his books, Jean speaks out against the folly of humans, the oil spills and the sailors that are abandoned. Captain Bülow never left the community of sea folk. In winter, he isolates himself to write. In his haven, on a little island in the Morbihan Gulf, he blends his own experiences with imagined stories. This sailor-writer depicts the adventures of men and women confronted with the hardships of the weather and life itself. An obvious choice for someone known as Captain Storm.
We worked in the worst meteorological conditions, nasty weather. And each time with every storm, we'd bring the rescued boats back to Brest or Cherbourg, and they'd call me Captain Storm. That's how I got my nickname. Yes, I feel good here, and it brings back fond memories. Some people like picnic weather. I prefer the wind and the movement. I was born in the wind and the waves, and I'll die in the wind and the waves.
A Force 10 storm. Brittany hunkers down, and the sea hurls torrents of surf up to impressive heights. With the howling wind and the unchained breakers, the fury of the sea knows no limits. This buffeting is the first serious alert of a winter that will be like all the others. Sometimes the storms off the western tip of Brittany follow one another for days on end. While everybody else is protecting themselves from the raging weather, a handful of men, eager for a rush of adrenaline, head out to tackle the waves.
The people here live with this. They live with the storm systems, but we have a different take on that. I mean, the locals have all lost someone at sea. It used to be only the fishermen's families here. They have a more suspicious attitude than we do. For them, the sea doesn't mean pleasure. Every time the elders would see me on the beach, they'd say, "Oh no, you can't go out there today. It's too dangerous." So we've brought a different attitude toward the ocean, which used to be synonymous with the storm's sinister side.
Du côté obscur, quoi.
In this corner of Finistère, Bruno André is a breed apart, ever in search of the ocean's peaks and troughs. 20 years ago, Bruno settled here on the tip of Cape Sizun.
The Pointe du Raz is really a rugged spot. The way it's formed, with all these sharp rocks, it's quite austere. It's black, it's gray. But it can also be magnificent with the contrast between the bad weather, like today. You'll get, say, a ray of sunlight that breaks through and gives you a riot of colors. In the blink of an eye, you go from a kind of creepy darkness to a paradise on earth with green water, bright whitecaps. It makes a landscape, a real moving painting.
Bruno has the humility of the local inhabitants. 2 years ago, he weathered a tempest in his own life, and it was the sea that saved him.
I went from living the dream of a professional windsurfer, traveling, enjoying each day on the water, to a hospital bed, laid up for 2 months, missing an organ. Well, missing 2 kidneys. They told me it was all over. I realized that it could all come to an end, but I never accepted it. I said to myself, okay, someday it will all finish, but not like this.
Bruno had a kidney transplant from his sister. It was a little over a year ago. Thanks to his determination to live and the energy he draws from the sea every day, he has been able to continue his passion. His old Renault 4L is a familiar sight around Cape Sizun. Whatever the weather, he'll be driving around the point in search of the perfect wave. Today, Bruno is going to meet an old friend, Antoine, another surfing buff.
Oh, there's some action out there?
A few nice sets.
Right, it's what they forecasted. Could be pretty heavy.
Look at this one.
Plus, there's some good walls today. Look.
Yeah, it's all good.
The wind's shifting. It's going to be good. Right. It's raining a bit, but that won't stop us. It's exciting because each time it's like a new discovery. What's it going to be like today? Will I be up to it? Or we'll joke, will the water accept me today or spit me out on the first wave? It's a very deep relationship.
Here in the Odéon Bay, the wind and swell offer them perfect conditions.
I've always heard that you're never stronger than nature. You're never stronger than the wind. So you have to learn how to play with them. If you fight nature, you'll always lose, because it's always the biggest wave, the strongest wind that'll have the last word. The idea is to adapt and to create an osmosis out there between man and nature. At a certain moment in my life, I realized that I didn't know just how lucky I was. It opened my eyes and made me realize that I was really a very lucky person. And now, I savor all these things in a different way. This misfortune taught me something very profound.
Bruno faced up to his disease as he faces up every day to the sea.
BMS weather report number 15 for Friday, January 9th, 2015. 4:36.
BMS weather report. Like the refrain of a song, it announces that the wind is not about to drop.
Wind south-southwest 7, rising to 8 at the end of the night. and tomorrow night. Gusts from Penmar to Belle-Île. Forecast valid from Friday, January 9th at 21 hours to Saturday, January at
On the water or in the air, the storm hunters, gladiators of the wind and sea, are the sole witnesses of these unchained elements.
The coast of Brittany is just so beautiful, and the weather makes it even more beautiful. It's a joy to see it from up here in the air. We have an exceptional job. Not everyone has the chance to see this and be out here in this weather.
Thierry at the controls. No one can beat him at flying a helicopter in the most extreme winds. As for Jean-René Keruzeret, he always has his eyes peeled in winter, his favorite season. For 10 years, he's been stalking storms, eager to capture images of nature in its fury.
We're over the Vieille Lighthouse. We'll be working between 150 to 500 feet. Then, we'll be landing on the Ile de Saint in 20 minutes.
Okay, I copy. Call me back on approach.
I'll call you back on the approach to Ile de Saint. Fox Lima Papa.
Look, enormous, wow.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Humongous, powerful.
Look at this one coming.
Yes.
This is the life, isn't it?
Not bad at all. We hardly ever get so much light. There's the plate tower. We're gonna head right into it. Awesome.
You can never know what a storm has in store until it's right on top of you. Only these two intrepid souls with their front row seat can enjoy this spectacle of the sea in its wildest state. Direction, the island of Saint, off the Pointe du Raz. Tracking storms, stalking the winds, is an offbeat profession, calling for patience and intuition.
L'île de Saint, d'abord, c'est merveilleux.
The island of Saint is just magnificent, a sublime spot. It's really the end of the earth, a wild, wonderful place. It's a privilege to be here, to be able to observe nature in the raw. It's fascinating. We landed because it's clouding over. We have a patch of blue behind us. We'll take off into the clear patch, and then it'll rain again. We take off between the showers.
Dottore, docteur. Docteur. Docteur en exercice. Mauvaise mat, comme on dit chez toi.
We're only observers, but the people who live here, they live with it. It's repetitive in the winter. Wind and rain, rain and wind. It's not fun for them. We're privileged. We can enjoy the sight, and it's very beautiful.
In the air and on land, their friendship has lasted for 10 years. It takes complicity and trust to fly in any and all conditions. Jean-René's nickname is Keru. It dates back to the time when he sailed the seas and earned his living with magic tricks.
Pick a number from 1 to 10.
8.
Watch. I cut the deck. 2, 4, 6, 8. What was the card you picked? What's your card? You remember? Turn it over.
Normal.
Normal.
I didn't see a thing.
Okay, driver, time to take off. Looks like the clouds are lifting.
The winter population of Saint is 130 souls, whose lives are punctuated by the arrival of the boats from the mainland. For several months a year, they bear the full brunt of the Atlantic's low-pressure systems.
When the weather's bad for the locals, it's good for us. With Terje, we've had great moments. In 2007, there was a huge storm. Something Dante-esque. 12-meter swells, 50 to 60-knot winds. Fearsome, but so beautiful.
The wind is blowing at 100 kilometers an hour. Queyroux and Thierry head to the northern part of the Iroise Sea, about 50 kilometers away.
For shooting, these are perfect conditions for getting good pictures, because we have good light, good winds. The color of the sea is wonderful and quite wild.
At the foot of the Île Vierge lighthouse, the conditions are exceptional. The helicopter is meeting up with other storm enthusiasts, whom Queyroux absolutely wants to film. Thomas Traversa has just come in from Marseille this morning to take on the Britain storm. Thomas is a great windsurfer, world champion of the waves.
Those rocks there are your limit. Don't go beyond them. Keep a good safety margin, because you'll be sailing out there. If there's the smallest problem, you could end up in the rocks. But just behind there's a little bay. You could swim back to shore from there.
The problem is that in addition to the swell, you have a strong wind coming in from the sea that skews everything. I'm going to try to position myself so that I can do what I want. It should be good. Of course, it's no piece of cake, but Mick filled me in. I know the places to avoid. That's the most important. As for the waves, I can handle them. But it's a new spot. There are a lot of rocks all over. I'll have to be really careful. In 2 seconds, you can end up in a bad spot and get hurt for nothing.
Going into the water in the middle of winter, you really have to want it. Thomas is fully aware of the risks he's taking by surfing among the rocks of Île Vierge, but he wants to give it a try, even in this 14-degree water. A frail figure in the midst of a seething cauldron. In this raging, chaotic sea, Thomas does one jump after another for 2 hours.
That wave there, you can't see it right now. It breaks only when there's a big swell like today. Not many people ride it. There's a big swell breaking over there. It's about 6 or 7 meters higher, maybe more. You have 7 or 8 meter waves further out.
With Thomas, windsurfing is more than a sport. It becomes choreography. A fragile dancer, he traces arabesques between sky and sea and plays with an unchained, angry ocean. In spite of the cold and approaching dusk, Thomas squeezes the last drops of enjoyment from the fading day. For Kjeru and Thierry the pilot, their storm mission on the point of Brittany draws to a close. Thomas has signed a pact with the sea. This evening again, he is master of the waves.